until now, we've been looking at some of the broad issues, the macro issues, which have changed human society since about 1750. The epidemiologic transition, the demographic transition, the age structural transition. Now I want to change gear and move towards what the implications of these changes are for longevity and for health status. We must recall, of course, that all this is directed towards the challenge that I set you at the very beginning of this particular series of MOOCs, that has the health system become a victim of its own successes. So that's in the background. But what I want to do today is to talk much more about longevity and health status. And this is one of the great disputed areas of demography, of the social sciences, of epidemiology. In fact, it's something which enters popular journals, newspapers and so on an almost daily basis. You'll read articles in the newspaper saying that human life is going to be extended to 120 years or forever or whatever. So it's a very big issue that we're dealing with today, and we can only just skirt the surface. And that's what my attempt is here. I hope that you're able to read up on it and follow what I've been saying. Now, the debate doesn't just touch demographic and actuarial theoretical factors, but also biomedical, including microbiology. The subject is also one with immense practical policy, planning and service implications. I must stress that. It is the basis of what we are planning for, what policy is being set for. And unfortunately, that means it's often subject to ideology. For example, neoliberal economists often believe that people should bear full responsibility for their own health status and the need for health services, paying for it and so on. And finally, as I've stressed, it's an issue of enormous popular interest. Now, the questions are these. If people are living longer, will it cost much more for the state, for governments? That's we call a fiscal burden. If people are living longer, will that cost much more for families? A familial burden. If they're living longer, are they in good health or poor health relative to others in their age group? We can't expect a 75-year-old to have the same health status as a 25-year-old. And how do we measure this? This is a huge issue which I'm going to touch on here today. Or will they live longer in poor health? That's being exposed to severe illnesses at the same stages as occur today, but if the life span is being extended, is this a much longer period in ill health? And how do we measure that? And that, of course, would be very costly for the health services and for the social services. So that then raises an absolutely fundamental question. What is good health? What is poor health, particularly among the elderly? If elderly can walk, I walked today from the bus and up 5 flights of steps, I might add, to record this particular MOOC. I didn't run up the steps like some of the young people do, but I did walk up those. So that's good health for an elderly person. Now, and moreover, we must recognize that in the developed countries and in many developing countries, most retired people have a series of health props. They have medications. They have prosthetic aids. They have vaccinations. For example, every year I have a vaccination for influenza. And that allows them to live normal, in inverted commas, daily lives. So are they in poor health? No. They're in good health with those particular props. And by the way, many of those props do not cost very much. It's the high-tech interventions which are going to cost much more. So therefore we want to avoid the high-cost interventions. If we can cure diabetes, not cure diabetes, but manage diabetes on the ground at a primary healthcare level, that's much better than having a person come into a tertiary hospital and have to have a very long, a very difficult operation. The evidence, such as it is, because it's actually rather short term, suggests that the older people of today perform their daily tasks of living better than generations in the past. We call this functional health. Things like going to the toilet on your own, feeding yourself, walking up a flight of steps, walking perhaps down to the nearest local shop. Moreover, there's much better surveillance, much better monitoring of older people and indeed of the population as a whole, better diagnosis, and earlier and generally more efficient intervention. But there are still major questions we have to ask. Who is going to deliver the services? Obviously, we need a young population. And we need a young population which is very diverse in its occupational skills. We're not just talking about highly trained surgeons, general practitioners, nurses, social workers, and so on. We're also talking about people who have the expertise of care, compassion, and so on. Who's going to wipe the chin of an old person? And even the best savers in the world, even the wealthiest in the world, when they're getting old, they're going to need a younger person to look after some of their functional needs. And who's going to pay the costs? Is it a tax burden, a fiscal burden, or is it a family burden? Now, these issues are very important for the next module, but they have resonance here when we get to measures and to indices, which we're going to do a little later. Now, this also raises some downstream issues of philosophical undertones. Should access to services be prioritised? Now, some see this as very important, and some see what is called equality, which we'll be talking about later, as a means of doing this, and to saying who should be at the head of the queue, who should go down the queue. But how on earth do you do that? By severity, if this can be measured? For example, should a road accident victim who is helicoptered into a hospital be given precedence over other injury cases who are waiting in the hospital, perhaps waiting in beds, costing a lot to the hospital system? Or should it be by age? Should a child take precedence over an elderly patient? Or should it be by diagnostic category? And how on earth do you judge one against the other? They're apples and oranges. So this takes me to the end of the introduction to this particular module.